In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, here all afternoon. I was up in New York for the better part of a week surrounding the elections there, and one thing was becoming pretty clear, to me at least. The way that people think about these elections has got to change at some point. The idea that Chris Quinn, the Speaker of the City Council in New York, was going to do well because she'd, pick up women, which made up 58% of the vote, or that she'd have, a good block of voters in the gay community, or that Thompson, the guy that came in second place, was going to do well with the African American vote. All of these kind of mistaken pieces of identity politics, none of them came to fruition. And Tina Dupuy, she's a syndicated columnist and the editor-in-chief of thecontributor.com, is here today because she's written about this topic specifically, the waning impact of identity politics. Tina, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Karl.
So, Chris Quinn lost the lady vote and lost the gay vote. If you look at the way Republicans play politics, she should have had them both wrapped up. Black people vote for Obama because he's black, and women vote for women because they're ladies, and gays vote for gays because it's like a party. What am I missing here?
All Latinos will vote for Marco Rubio because they really want to be Republicans and they just want an excuse.
Right. Explain the fallacy here, because the exit polling didn't show that that's how things broke down, did it?
Yeah, it was kind of fascinating. Christine Quinn was the women didn't vote for the female candidate. She came in third among all candidates. The gays did not vote for Christine Quinn either. She came in second among the gay community. Black women did not vote for the black candidate. Jews did not vote for the Jewish candidate. And the only thing that was true is that Asians voted for the Asian American candidate, which of course is a very small minority in New York City. So the Asian American candidate came in just above Wiener, which I think is it's something to really celebrate. It was really interesting. There's this kind of like lazy, like, look, we have, and it's really cynical on the Republican side of tokenism, and we saw this at the RNC, where I was at the RNC, and just the whitest, angriest group of people you've ever seen in your life. But solid. The delegates and the people attending were solid white. And then on stage, they kind of pushed out their diversity. Like they had a couple of people, they had Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah, it was like Republican National Convention with speakers by United Colors of Benetton.
Exactly. And so when you talk to Republicans, they're like, look, we have a diverse field. Look at the RNC. And I've said to Republicans, on shows and stuff, I'm like, look, I was there, okay? There were 3 people of color. They were all on stage.
Right.
This was not but they've kind of been using this like, look, Marco Rubio, he speaks the Spanish, so of course you're going to want to vote for him. Here's the thing. He is a Cuban American, which is fine. But he's a Cuban American, and his, of course, stance on immigration reform is that you can't get to the front of the line, and he's against amnesty. Well, if you are Cuban,
right,
you get to the United States, you get way to the front of the line, and you also get what is called amnesty if you have dry feet in the policy since the 90s. So for a man of Cuban descent to kind of like be against what his people, they just don't quite understand what
the role that policy plays in this is much larger at the end of the day. I remember the discussions when I was in Minneapolis, St. Paul for the Republican convention in 2008, when by the way, I have to tell you that watching octogenarians on their jitterbug smartphones as they learned that Sarah Palin, whom they'd never heard of, was the Republican nominee for vice president, was hysterical and fascinating all at once. But the conversation around it was all these Hillary voters who didn't want to vote for Obama were going to flock to the Republican Party because Obama had chosen somebody with ovaries.
I love that you bring that up. Not that you just brought up jitterbug phones, but I had a very interesting conversation with an interview with Stephen K. Bannon, the documentarian. I use the word very loosely, who did the film The Undefeated about Sarah Palin. And there was of course a screening that I went to right online of this film, and because my editor hated me, but. Anyway, as we were talking, I asked him, I asked him about this film, and especially about the weird English kind of that he used. The word undefeated normally goes to someone who has never been defeated, not someone who has doesn't feel defeated. It was a very strange choice of titling, but.
It'd be like saying undefeated, the untold story of the 2-term governor of Alaska.
Exactly. Yeah, there was something about like, okay, you're right, exactly. The title is disingenuous, and then it got kind of inflated. So he kept on saying during our interview, "I made this film for you," and he kept on asking me like, "What do you think of it?" And I made this film for you, and I was like, "Well, who do you think? Like, are you saying like the media? Like, who am I to you?" Is more of a question that I would like answered. And he kept on, I made this, and what he made it for were professional, accomplished women, to tell professional, accomplished women that Sarah Palin is professional and accomplished just like them.
Uh-huh.
And, this is a woman and he wanted the Hillary voters, the people who were upset that Barack Obama beat Hillary, and that's why there's not a woman in the White House right now. He wanted those women to go, oh yeah, Sarah Palin, she's our girl. And I was like, that is, to call Sarah Palin intelligent and accomplished is so incredibly condescending to intelligent and accomplished women.
To call her accomplished is condescending to any woman with an IQ north of 20.
It's just like, oh look, this one has ovaries. She's just like all of you, and it's like no, and it's because again and again you will find in these elections that women will vote for issues. They're not going to vote just because someone is female. Now, what happens?
I mean, look at how small the gender gap was when Bush was reelected. It was tiny.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things going on here. There's always been what I would categorize as like the bankers' wives, like the kind of right-wing Republican activists who have been the champions of right-wing policies because they're bankers' wives and have a lot of free time on their hands. Like there's always been that kind of like wing of female activists who have been against feminism, who've been against women's suffrage, etc. Women's rights, what have you, because that's what their husbands are also against for whatever reason. And then you have the left wing activists, and so women are divided on women's issues as well. They're not, we are not a monolith. And when Republicans and really Democrats, when politicians think that that's going to somehow, or strategists think that's somehow going to sway women to vote either way, they are mistaken, and it shows up when we go to the polls.
Well, and to that point, I mean, the women are divided on those important issues, but what they do want, and I think this is where you can see a gender divide grow. What they do want is people who can articulately and from a position of education discuss these things smartly. When you have politicians saying, women can spontaneously stop a pregnancy when they get raped because their body shuts it down, even pro-life women look at that and say, "You're an idiot. I can't vote for you."
That is true. Even right-wing women kind of like, you can't really co-sign.
It's like, I remember high school biology. I know what my body is capable of doing.
It really brings us all together as a country.
Well, I wish it did more so, especially when you think of people like Palin and Bachmann. Bachmann, of course, from the United States Congress of the United States of America. So, question for you. What can Republicans learn by looking at the Democratic primary for mayor in New York?
They can learn by being able to talk intelligently about issues that people care about. This is not a thing that Republicans have done well. I mean, Republicans are, they see 10% of Americans are for something, and they're like, okay, we can make it 30.
Right.
They're not really into like being popular. They're really into the last 4 years, at least. It's been about saying no.
Well, and beyond the no, it's been Reagan's mantra for 30 years, and it's stale and old. And when they were talking about the Republican Party needs to be refreshed, rebooted, 2.0, 3.0, whatever, the Windows 98 equivalent of the Republican Party is, when they were talking about that, the thing that they never talked about, they talked about needing better messengers, they talked about needed diverse voices, they talked about all these things, but they never talked about needing to change policy.
That is, yeah, right. They want to have a shinier veneer on the same old thing.
So when they talk about immigration reform, for example, and they put Marco Rubio right up there out front, I don't think it's lost on many people that one of the reasons that Rubio is there is because he has Hispanic or Latin heritage. But I'm curious to know what you think. I mean, if Hispanics are watching the debate over immigration reform at home, and they see that Democrats are all gung-ho for a path to citizenship, that, you pay a small fine, you learn English, you wait in line like everybody else. And Republicans are like, no, we can't do that. Let's build an electrified fence with alligators and a moat, and then you have to learn how to do advanced trigonometry and algebra and calculus, and you have to learn 5 languages. And so they see the token Republican Hispanic guy up there trying to make compromises to bring his party along, and those compromises are an insult to an entire group of people.
Right. I mean, and the bottom line is, I don't think that they are really trying to get the Latino vote. They probably will get the Cuban vote.
Well, that's even questionable these days. I mean, Obama's won them twice now.
The Republicans, that's who fled Cuba, were really like the Republicans, right?
But even, that's the thing, Tina. That's the thing, Tina. They've screwed that up too, because now the Cuban vote in Florida has split pretty evenly the last 2 presidential elections, and Democrats are winning the young Cuban vote.
Actually better. See, that split evenly is actually higher than any other Latino vote for Republicans in the entire country.
But it's a reversal of where it was before, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
I mean, Republicans used to win the Cuban vote by 30 or 40 points, and now they lose the Cuban vote overall. And for young Cubans that are 1 generation or 2 generations removed from Castro, they're losing that in the same margin that they used to win the Cuban vote. So something has got to change. I mean, you look at these maps, it is no laughing matter that this country's on the way towards one-party dominance again, because the Republican Party has been unwilling to change. It's shades of the Whigs, right?
Right. Well, yes, and since you bring up the Whigs, I mean, the Whigs were brought down by an extremist nativist group called the Know Nothings.
Right.
The Whigs didn't bring themselves down. The Whigs were brought down by, before we called it primarying. They were shoved to the right by a nativist group who did not want to compromise and wanted their country back from this plague of immigrants who were coming in and ruining the country. So
friggin' Irish.
This is exactly the Irish and the Germans. They were coming in and they were ruining everything, and papalists even worse. They were Italians. So that was this. We've seen this all before, and it didn't bode well for the Whigs.
Tina,
the problem with Republicans is that they want to put their head in the sand and just pretend like it's 1972.
Well, I mean, they are nothing if not playing good ostrich. Tina Dupuy, the editor-in-chief of thecontributor.com. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Carl.
All righty. So that's it on the gender divide. When we come back, we're going to have more great conversations about some big issues. Stick around. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we will be right back.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor. A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer. My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life. If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won a fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like, look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
It used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you're running to, huh? I didn't even see you guys there.
Get the test, get the polyp, get the cure.
I get the phone call!
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff at UPO. As a community action agency in Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. So, if you've been paying attention this week, Syria has taken all kinds of twists and turns. Last week we were talking to Congressman Alan Grayson, and I was pretty confident we were probably going to end up in some kind of a warlike situation, whether or not Congress approved it. And the congressman talked a lot about how the American people were not for it. And I think that's been cleared based on everything that you see in social media. And if you listen to talk radio on either side of the issue, the people have been calling in and saying that they're not for it. I have friends that work in Congress, and they've been telling me that the calls have been coming in 8 to 2 or 10 to 1 against some kind of a military intervention in Syria. And then you had John Kerry speaking from the podium, and he was asked point blank, is there anything Syria can do to avoid military intervention? And the Secretary of State said, well, I guess they could agree to join the League of Nations and give up their weapons. And then things change dramatically. And joining me to talk about all that's happened this week and the role that everyday Americans really played in this evolving situation is Amanda Johnson. She's the Chief of Staff of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Amanda, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
So John Kerry's up there, and this reporter asks a question. I've never seen something change so dramatically overnight from one reporter's question asking, is there anything that Syria can do to change? Now, in the run-up to that question, groups like the Progressive Change Campaign Committee and Congressman Grayson's PAC have all been pushing really hard and trying to get to speak their minds to their elected representatives in Washington. There's been very little guidance of, you need to tell them this, right? It's been a lot of express your feelings to your representatives. And from everything I've heard from people in Congress, and these are people that are not necessarily peaceniks or whatever, some of them are a little hawky, they've been saying that the calls have been coming in 10-1 against military intervention. And this crosses all kinds of boundaries. What do you make of this, and what role has the Progressive Change Campaign Committee played in all of this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it shows that the public is really opposed to military action in Syria. You know, one of the first things that we did is survey our members and see what they thought. You know, we did a survey over 72 hours, and we're actually still getting responses in. And with over 53,000 or 57,000 responses, we had 73% of those folks were against U.S. military action in Syria. And most, wanted to do something. I believe it was 89% of folks wanted to do something in Syria, but did not see bombing Syria as something that was the strategic option and that would achieve our goals.
Well, even if they were open-minded, I assume a lot of people were in the same shoes I was in. Like, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to a military option, but I wanted to be convinced of it. I didn't want to knee-jerk just support it because it's the president asking me to. Right. And there were plenty of distinguished voices, experts in the field, who have not been opposed to every war, saying, look, here's what happens if we do a military strike without taking out the regime. You could kill lots of innocent civilians, which would make it more difficult once a new regime is established to gain trust and support, because people would hold it against us that civilians were killed in our attack. You could strengthen the regime. They could continue to use their chemical weapons, knowing that they're not going to be toppled. There were so many. They could go after Israel, which would then spark a broader conversation about what would happen in the Middle East. There were very few voices out there that weren't saying it's very complicated and it could get very, very messy. And it seemed like nobody was really talking about an effort towards diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, there are a lot of possible repercussions for bombing Syria. And we believe, and our members believe, that diplomacy was an option. And as we've seen over this past week, that's true. It's absolutely true. And, this might not be the only diplomatic solution. This war should never be our first resort or our second resort. It should be a last resort.
Well, and 10 years ago, when, Libya wanted to come in from the cold, it was probably one of the only, successes of the Bush years. I think it was 2003. Libya wanted to come in from the cold, wanted to join the League of Nations, so to speak, and give up their chemical weapons and sign on to the charter against chemical weapons, and we allowed it, and they were rid of biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction, and that was a great success. And I feel like when a country offers it, even if it's even if there's some politics involved, and let's be honest, there's always politics involved, even if a country is offering to do this, and even if it makes our administration or our country look bad because this may have been an option before we started contemplating war, we've got to take every step possible to try and lead them in that direction. Because the ultimate goal here, and you tell me if you agree, is not punishment. It's whatever is going to serve the best interest of the people there. And dropping bombs versus getting rid of chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction from a region, I don't think there's much of a choice there. It's not a Solomon's choice at all. You choose to get rid of the weapons. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, in terms of the goal, what I heard from President Obama was actually punishment. It was deterrence and degradation, I believe, are the words that he was using. But it did seem like he actually went and kind of slapped Syria on the wrist and say, no, you can't do that. And I think this solution that has come up is
but that's exactly my point. Short of removing a regime, what good is slapping a wrist if all you're doing is lobbing missiles at buildings you think there's military targets in? You may be getting some of the military targets, but you're also hurting people, the very people that you're supposedly trying to help.
Right, and possibly sparking other repercussions that we have no idea of. It could get very complicated.
Right. So you all have had this petition at boldprogressives.org. You've had tons of people, weigh in with their opinion, but you're also involved in campaigns across the country. What is this taking up much oxygen on the campaign trail as well?
Well, not quite. I mean, it's definitely taken a lot of our attention, and it was necessary. This is something that we had to act on. That was fast moving. Things were changing day by day, but we're still moving on other campaigns as well. We have our expanding Social Security campaign that is kept going, even though the media and the congressional attention was elsewhere. But that's something that we're continuing to move forward.
And so I guess we just wait and see what happens here, right? We've got things working, their course. You've got a report coming out from the United Nations, and they're trying to work. What can people do to stay engaged on this issue with Progressive Change Campaign Committee?
Well, they can definitely go to our website, boldprogressives.org, take the survey, sign up and join in our email list. We'll continue to keep folks updated at the ways to take action on this. It's something that we'll be watching very carefully to see how things develop. This morning, actually, great news came out that I believe the U.S. and Russia reached an agreement on, having Syria, have international folks come in and contain the chemical weapons and destroy them. So we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on that and continue to keep.
Well, it's certainly heartening news. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, Amanda Johnson. She's the Chief of Staff at the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. When we come back, we're going to talk to Bryce Covert, the Economic Policy Editor at Think Progress, about the living wage bill in D.C. when it comes to big box stores. Stick around. This is Take Action News, and we'll be back after this.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. I live here in Washington, D.C. I grew up in California, and before I left California, Walmart had started trying to move in to Los Angeles where I lived. And I remember one particular instance, them trying to move into Inglewood, and there was this big drawn-out fight over whether or not they would come in. They ended up going on the ballot, and the city council members, mayor of Inglewood were all against it, and they ended up winning, and Inglewood is Walmart free. So here in Washington, D.C., we had these riots here in the 60s, and a bunch of grocery stores just hightailed it out of Washington, D.C., and left lots of areas in the city without decent grocery options. So when Walmart came knocking on the door 40 years later, saying that they wanted to come into some of these neighborhoods and build big Walmart stores. A lot of people were happy, but then again, people knew who Walmart was, and they were like, you don't pay your people enough. You force them onto welfare, basically, in order to get enough money to pay for food and health care. You need to do better by your workers. So a living wage bill was proposed in the city council here, a great piece of legislation that would require these types of big box stores to pay people a living wage. Worked its way through the city council. City council voted for it, and the mayor vetoed the bill. Our corrupt freaking mayor here in Washington, D.C. vetoed the bill just this past week. Joining me to talk about this issue is Bryce Covert, the economic policy editor at Think Progress. Bryce, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so what did I miss here? The Walmart has been pushing really hard. They said when this legislation came up to pay workers a living wage, that they would pull out of Washington, D.C. and try to figure out ways to get out of the deals they'd already struck to build these new stores if the mayor signed the bill. Hadn't they already agreed that they were going to pay their workers $12 an hour?
What happened was they had agreed to come in. They were going to open up 3 stores, and then this legislation was proposed, which is somewhat more narrow than just a regular minimum wage hike for D.C. overall. It targets companies that have $1 billion in sales or more and stores with more than 75,000 square feet, and those that don't bargain collectively with their workers, that they have to pay their workers at least $12.50 an hour. And what that meant was Walmart, along with other large retailers, was going to have to pay substantially more than Walmart is used to if it wanted to open up in D.C. And as soon as the legislation came around, the company started making threats that it was going to rescind its plans to open up stores in the city, which didn't end up actually changing any votes on the city council, but I think had a
well,
lot
and
of weight
it wasn't crying wolf either. There have been places in rural America, for example, people can go to websites like Wake Up Walmart and Walmart Watch, where a county will give property tax break for 10 years to a Walmart to come to town. And at the end of the 10 years, let's say the county's like, okay, no more tax cut. And Walmart would say, if you don't keep this going, we're going to leave. And then they don't keep it going, and they just evacuate the store and move across the county line a mile away, build a new store, and do it there.
Yeah, Walmart is definitely used to getting its way and being able to throw its power around. And it's particularly persuasive, I think, with mayors, because it promises that it's going to come in and create a lot of jobs. And that is something that mayors across the country really want to be able to point to, that when I was in office, I created X number of jobs because Walmart came to town and other policies. So when Walmart threatens that it's going to leave, that really freaks a lot of mayors out in a way that doesn't necessarily freak out like a city council. The same thing that happened in D.C. just now basically played out in Chicago about 7 years ago. Walmart was set to open a number of stores. Then Chicago City Council passed a living wage bill, which was then vetoed by the mayor after Walmart threatened it was going to walk. And what we saw happen there was actually there's very solid evidence that Walmart did then open up its stores, but its promises that it was going to create all these jobs didn't actually pan out. It was really just a wash for job creation.
No, what it does is it sucks the jobs out of mom and pop shops or even mid-range stores into its stores, and it shutters the ones around it.
Exactly. The evidence in Chicago is that Walmart probably created about 300 full-time jobs, but it also destroyed about 300 jobs. So it was really a wash, but it also does not stimulate local business the way that it says it would. There was really strong evidence that the closer a business was to Walmart in Chicago, the more likely it was to close up shop and just leave. And retail in general isn't very likely to stimulate a local economy. It's just not going to give it that kind of boost.
But what about these areas like, I know the geography of Washington, D.C. is terribly interesting to the radio audience. But these neighborhoods like, way down on 14th Street where there's not a grocery store within driving distance or, within walking distance of anything, over by the old, military hospital where they were going to put in a Walmart. I mean, it's not like we're not sympathetic to the issue that there's a need to bring grocery stores to these places. It's just a matter of how much people are being paid. There's no point in creating these jobs that are just going to suck jobs from other places if you're going to be forcing them on the food stamps and then forcing them onto, Medicaid. Didn't the spokespeople for Walmart say that they were going to be paying $12 an hour anyways?
Yeah, they had made promises to do a whole bunch of things, to donate to charities, to help with job training. I'm not sure how those are going to plan out now that this bill has been killed, but it's pretty clear that whatever they were saying before, they are not interested in being forced to pay a $12.50 an hour wage. Their wages are much lower. Some of the other companies that would have been impacted by this bill, let's say Costco, actually wouldn't have been impacted much at all. Costco workers make over $20 an hour, and Costco does very well.
Well, I mean, and let's be honest, Costco, that's a company that's not going to last. What is it, 20 years old? It's not going to last. It's not doing too well.
Actually, it's doing quite well. If you look at Costco compared to Walmart, Costco is making really good profits right now. It's getting a very high return on the employees that it pays, whereas Walmart sales have actually been struggling quite a lot this year. And a lot of analysts are pointing to the fact that Walmart doesn't have enough full-time employees to keep their products on the shelves. It's leading to huge lines. It's leading to huge amounts of customer dissatisfaction, and it's actually really hurting. So I think that you're starting to see Walmart's practices start to catch up with it and really impact its bottom line.
Well, that should be causing some nervousness. I mean, what are we going to do if the Waltons, who are worth $110 billion, can't afford to buy whatever they want?
I think we'll all probably survive. But yeah, you would think that it would sort of start to be ringing alarm bells at Walmart that maybe the path that they've taken is not actually a financially
well, it's certainly not Sam Walton's path. That's for sure. I mean, the reason that they've grown so quickly since Walton's death, the original Sam, whose namesake is Sam's Club, the reason that they've grown so much in part is because he used to have this thing, Buy America, from America, that line. They've pushed, retailers and manufacturers to China if they wanted their products carried in Walmart. Anything to save an extra few pennies. And it's no wonder that they're not willing to pay their employees more.
Right. And the other thing we're seeing is that they're they have been able to grow a lot because they offer very low prices, which, is very appealing to a lot of people who aren't making a lot of money. A lot of Americans are struggling to get by. But I think we're starting to see this tipping point where Walmart is a huge employer and it pays very little. And we're getting to a point where I think their workers are actually not even feeling able to afford its products.
Right.
They do not make a lot of money. They really don't make enough to get by. I mean, we see that Walmart workers disproportionately rely on the safety net and on public benefits.
They're actually encouraged to use that safety net by Walmart.
Right, yeah. Only about half of Walmart workers are on its health care plans because they're so expensive. So a lot of people end up relying on Medicaid to get by.
Well, and, I know from some work I did with the United Food and Commercial Workers that Walmart over the years has encouraged its workers to seek health care from the government, which tells you that Walmart knows. So what's the next step here in Washington, D.C.? The mayors vetoed the legislation to pay, big box workers a living wage. Is there any chance of a veto override from the city council?
People don't seem to think it's very likely. The bill passed 8-5, and it would need to pass with 9 people voting yes. The veto override vote is coming next week on Tuesday, so we'll see. But no one's really indicated that they're going to change their vote. So I think the activists would have to get to someone who voted no and really convince them to vote yes if we're going to see an override. I think probably the next step from that is to try and think about just a minimum wage hike for the city that would apply across the board.
And could they do an initiative to do that in the next election?
I think so. And Gray has sort of given some lukewarm support for something like that. So I think, if they can't get this veto override, the smart thing would probably be to go and try and just raise the minimum wage across the board.
Well, and, to that point, I mean, the mayor's pretty weak mayor, so we'll see where things go. Bryce Covert from Think Progress, I want to thank you for joining us to talk about this. Where can people follow you on Twitter?
At Bryce Covert.
Excellent. So the fight continues with Walmart here in the nation's capital, probably in your neighborhoods as well. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be right back.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell. Organized labor received some good news in the midst of its 2013 Constitutional Convention in Los Angeles this week. On Monday, an Indiana judge ruled that the state's right-to-work law was unconstitutional. Judge John Sadia ruled the law unconstitutional because it required unions to provide benefits to non-members without just compensation. The law was challenged by Operating Engineers Local 150, and the union's general president, James Callahan, announced the ruling on the convention floor.
Local 150 argued Indiana's right-to-work law is unconstitutional because it makes it illegal for unions to collect fees for services that are federally required to be provided. This is a victory for the middle class. These laws are nothing but thinly veiled tools to weaken unions, and this is a big win for workers who rely on unions to provide decent wages and benefits.
On Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller filed an appeal to the ruling, and it will be sent directly to the Indiana Supreme Court. That announcement came shortly before a resolution was introduced and passed calling on the AFL-CIO to develop a Southern organizing strategy. The resolution was partially born out of the predominance of right-to-work laws that have been passed in Southern states over the last decade. AFSCME Florida Council 79 President Jeanette Wynn spoke on the floor to explain how right-to-work laws have been detrimental to working people all across the South.
Suppression of dues deduction, suppression of pension, and suppression of all those state benefits that state employees have earned throughout their career.
This week, the labor movement also became more inclusive by adopting a resolution supporting gender identity and expression. The resolution, which passed unanimously, means the AFL-CIO will officially recognize the rights of transgendered employees. International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers International President Ed Hill introduced the resolution.
This amendment makes an important statement about the Federation's support for transgender workers and the fact that they are welcome in our movement. It shows that we're a broad and inclusive movement that welcomes all workers.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can work with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal or shelter or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10 and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Question: is making higher education available to every American more important to our national interest than letting Wall Street profiteers make a few more billions of dollars each year? Answer: of course. Yet, our political leaders, pushed by Wall Street lobbyists, have been making the opposite choice for years. As a result, banksters have loaded students down with a mountain of high-interest loans, rising from just over $2 billion a decade ago to nearly $1 trillion last year. Worse, the financiers, either banks or government lenders, have become the gatekeepers of advanced education, shutting out thousands of young people wanting to get ahead but not able to hurdle the formidable financial barrier. This is enormously costly to America and completely unnecessary. The smart choice, as we learned from the GI Bill after World War II, would be to make college and professional training free. Universal access to higher education, i.e. free access, produces a very high return on the public's investment while also producing a widely shared prosperity and a broadly educated citizenry. Of course, an upfront investment in a smarter, more productive, more democratic civilization is pricey. So where do we get the money to do what America needs? Get it from where it went. Wall Street's super-rich speculators are now making millions of super-fast robotic financial transactions per second, generating trillions of dollars a year for them, but producing nothing of real value for us, while distorting and endangering markets. This is Jim Hightower saying, put a tiny tax on each of those automated gambles by speculators, and more than enough money will come into the public coffers to free up higher ed for all. For information, check out United States Students Association at www.usstudents.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation. This is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Hello, this is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com, where you can sign up for my email list and connect with me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and every other social media you can possibly imagine. This is Take Action News. As I said, be sure to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. We've got Peter and Rachel on the controls. Want to thank you for sticking around with us. You might know that on Tuesday in Colorado there was an election, a recall election. The gun nuts have been going after anything they possibly can. And Colorado passed some groundbreaking gun control legislation this past year. And the NRA wanted to get rid of a few legislators to teach a lesson. So that's exactly what they did. They mounted a recall effort against a couple state legislators in Colorado, and they were successful on Tuesday. Joining me now to talk about the election and where we go from here is Rick Palacio. He is the chairman of the Colorado Democratic Party. Rick, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I just want to make sure you don't confuse me with our neighbors further to the west.
Well, I grew up in California and worked for the California Democratic Party, so it's just rote memory at this point.
Right. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you. So, what happened in Colorado? I know that the NRA poured in, almost $500,000 into into the recalls there, and that's big money for something like this.
Yeah, the NRA and other right-wing organizations certainly poured in a lot of money, and they had a lot of ground troops, both in Pueblo and Colorado Springs. And I think, unfortunately, what happened is we ended up in a situation where, for a variety of reasons, both of these legislators lost. Senator Angela Giron in Pueblo, which is my hometown, and Senator John Morse, who was the president of the Senate, actually, in Colorado Springs. He ended up losing by a much narrower percentage than Angela, but both of them losses. I think a couple interesting things to point out here. The recalls, while we're upset that we lost these members, they're not going to change the fact that our legislature passed laws that are supported by really an overwhelming majority of Coloradans. These laws are going to remain on the books, and our Democratic majority in the state Senate is maintained as well.
And so what message does it send? I know that I did see the state senators who were recalled on some cable programs. What message are they striking as a result of the recall? I think this is particularly powerful when you think about politicians who rarely are willing to give up their seats to do the right thing.
Yeah, well, I think mostly the wins that the Republicans had in these elections were mostly symbolic, and unfortunately at an enormous cost to taxpayers. In fact, it was actually the costliest election ever in Pueblo County's history. But I think beyond the symbolism here, which mostly it is, it doesn't mean that the losses were absolutely meaningless. 80%, as we've shown and as polling has shown, 80% of the people in Colorado support background checks for gun purchases. And the other aspect is support efforts to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and those who've been convicted of domestic violence. And those are really, that was the extent to which these lawmakers went. But I think what ultimately ended up happening here is the rhetoric from the other side became so loud, the scare tactics so scary that people didn't look specifically at what was passed, and they allowed all of this to cloud their judgment and voted, unfortunately, to recall these two legislators.
Well, and what I've liked thus far in the discussion afterward is that these two legislators have stood firm and said, look, we may be out of office, but that's the price you pay for doing the right thing, then that's the price you pay for doing the right thing. If we could do it all over again, we'd still vote for it. And that shows a degree of courage that you don't often see from politicians. Yeah, and I think it's a very good point. Both of these districts, neither of them, the left of left districts, neither of these are real urban districts. Neither of them are in the Denver metro area. So they're somewhat blue dog conservative Democrats that live in them. And these two lawmakers took what may not have been the politically correct step in voting for these pieces of legislation, but they were the right things to do. And you mentioned that it takes some time to explain complex pieces of legislation to people, and maybe that's what the NRA and its ilk were counting on. If we get a recall out there before these two legislators have time to explain to their constituents what exactly this legislation does and how timid it is and in what it requires, background checks and certain folks not being allowed to have guns. If they have time to explain that, then, well, we'll never be able to get them out of office. So they had to strike with a recall right away. Sure, yeah. And I think you hit perhaps to the heart of what at least one of these losses, I think, was about, and it's more public engagement piece here. There's a public engagement piece that every one of our lawmakers, regardless of where their districts are, whether they're safe or they're competitive, public engagement is a requirement. It's not an option. They need to understand what their lawmakers are voting on, the positions that their lawmakers are taking, so that they then we're not forced with more recalls like this in the future. And if we are, the public has some sort of an idea as to what the real issues are, as opposed to the scare tactics and the rhetoric. It's absolutely fascinating. So what is the Colorado Democratic Party doing moving forward on this issue? Is there going to be an effort to educate people more broadly? Well, first, I think both of these districts, they're temporarily in Republican hands. 14 months or 12, 14 months is all that these two new Republican lawmakers are going to sit there. They're both districts that we're going to win back in 2014, and we're going to expand our Democratic majority then in 2014. But there is some public engagement, some educational opportunities that I think we all should take, not just at the party level, at the activist level, at the neighbor-to-neighbor level, and with our lawmakers. I think we have a lot of teaching that needs to be done in informing the general public about what it is that our lawmakers actually passed. Well, and in 2014, it's not going to be just this one issue. There's going to be a whole plethora of things that the legislature has done with the governor to make Colorado better. Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, our legislators have really tackled some serious issues, some serious energy issues, some economic issues. I mean, Colorado is one of the leading states in economic recovery in the West, and I think that was lost in these recalls as well. Colorado passed some very progressive pieces of legislation. We had tuition equity for undocumented students that passed. Civil unions was a huge deal in Colorado. So there are a lot of bread and butter issues to families of all types that our legislators tackled in this last session, and I'm sure that they're going to continue to do those same type of things moving forward into the new session. It's not all about guns, right? But when it is about guns, it's our responsibility to make sure that our constituencies and our communities really understand what the issues are. Absolutely. Rick Palacio, he is the chairman of the Colorado Democratic Party. Rick, thanks for joining me. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and when we come back after this break, we're going to talk about the failings in New York City's addiction treatment centers. Stick around. It's fascinating.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder. And I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guard-reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
Frisch, it didn't take long for Lillian Imbert to conclude that her outpatient drug treatment program wasn't helping her recovery. Fellow patients appeared to nod out in group therapy sessions that she found repetitive and shallow. They begged her to sell them her clean urine to fool the clinic's weekly testing. The clinic itself was dingy and run down, and her counselors seemed harried trying to juggle heavy caseloads. Interactions with them were perfunctory. Outside the clinic, she said a man she believed to be a patient openly sold drugs to those arriving for counseling. Imbert said she desperately wanted to transfer to a program that took recovery more seriously, but she couldn't. With rental assistance for the city of New York, she was living in a sober home, a place where indigent alcoholics and addicts typically reside 4 to a room while they undergo treatment. Imbert said her landlord set a rule. Either she went to a specific clinic, New York Service Network in Brooklyn, or he'd evict her. Seeing no other option, Imbert complied. Quote, "I felt trapped," she said. Most of the counselors were just going through the motions. It's an absolutely horrifying tale, and it only gets worse from there when you look at the industry and how it's policed. Joining me now to talk about this story is Jake Bernstein from ProPublica. Jake, thanks for joining me.
No, thank you for having me.
So, this just seems, when you consider, first of all, that this industry is there presumably to try and help people who are down and out, alcoholics seeking to get better, addicts seeking to get better, and you factor in these requirements and everything else. It's a pretty awful situation, right?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and probably ultimately penny wise and pound foolish, because these people will inevitably just sort of cycle through the system again and again and again, which is going to cost taxpayers more money in the long run.
Well, and it seems like, at least from your reporting and some of the reporting I've seen on CNN and other places, that some of these places just don't care. The more the merrier. The more times you have to go through the ringer, the better. It's not about helping you. It's about getting the money from the government to treat you.
Yeah, the worst. I think you can say that about the worst providers. I mean, they're putting the money that they receive from the government ahead of actually helping people.
So you examined, on behalf of ProPublica, the New York service network, and what did you find?
Well, I found this outpatient drug treatment clinic that had repeatedly been put onto regulators' radar. They had done audits, they had done licensing reviews, they had consistently found problems, and particular, they had found problems involving the outpatient clinic's relationship with these sober homes that fed it patients. And yet regulators didn't really seem to do very much to stop what one regulator actually termed an unholy alliance, which he put in quotes. So this is a problem that is bigger than just this one clinic in New York City.
What incentive do these treatment facilities have to do a good job if they're just going to get a steady stream of people that they're, basically in cahoots with from these sober homes?
Well, it certainly takes away the one incentive, which is sort of the way the market would work. I mean, you would think that these alcoholics and addicts who were serious about their treatment, who were indigent and had no place to go, that they would find outpatient treatment facilities that actually helped them and did good things. But the problem is that these people are trapped in these sober homes. The reimbursement rate, the rental assistance that they get to stay in these homes is $215 a month. The last time it went up in New York City is like 25 years ago. So there's no way that $215 a month is going to buy you decent housing in New York City. So they're trapped in these sober homes, and the sober homes tell them, if you want to stay here, you have to go to this specific outpatient treatment facility. Now, the homes, as terrible as they are still better than the public shelters of the street. So the indigent alcoholics and addicts end up staying in these homes and going to these outpatient treatment facilities that are just, that have all kinds of problems.
Well, and what do the homes say about this kind of system where they're only giving one option for treatment?
Well, this is the thing is that there are, I think, a number of unscrupulous homeowners. I mean, these sober homes in New York are completely unlicensed, so anybody can run a sober, basically a boarding house and call it a sober home, and it can attract all kinds of people. I mean, the sober home operator that I was looking at that funneled the most patients to New York Service Network is he's an ex-con. He was actually indicted and convicted for a health care scheme years earlier. So there was clearly more going on than treatment here. What we found were allegations that in return for sending patients to this clinic, the clinic owner was then paying the sober homeowner for the patients and for the services.
Which is just kind of, anybody else looking at it would say it's fraud. So, this is big money, big industry, though. I mean, I look at Malibu, California, for example. Homeowners there are up in arms. There are so many treatment facilities in Malibu, California, that it's unreal at this point. You're just as likely to find beachfront home as you are to find a beachfront recovery home. Does the fact that this is seen as big money, big industry with low regulations, little to no regulations for parts of it, attract these kinds of unscrupulous people?
I mean, there certainly seems to be some indication that is in fact the case. I mean, the bar for success in recovery, I believe, is very low. I mean, studies have shown that only 2 in 5 complete treatment at these outpatient treatment facilities. And there's a sense that as long, that if you're in recovery, relapses are common and are just part of the process. So outcome measures are kind of fuzzy. And then there aren't real rigorous requirements as far as what the kind of schooling and the kind of training counselors need to have. I mean, in California, someone told me, and I didn't check this out, but that you need more hours of classroom licensing requirements to be an air condition repairman than you do to be a drug treatment counselor. So,
towards that end, I'm curious, I don't know if this is something that you've found or not, but many people are now being sentenced to rehabilitation programs. Is there a recovery percentage difference between people that are forced into recovery versus people who seek recovery on their own?
I haven't really looked at that. My guess is that it depends a little bit on where they're sent to and what kind of follow-up there is, and where they are in their whole sort of cycle of needing recovery. I mean, what we do know is that in 2009, the federal, state, and local government spent $6.7 billion on outpatient treatment clinics that serve indigent patients or the poor, and that number is just going to grow. I mean, what we're looking at is under the health reform law and under parity laws, there's going to be millions of more people that are going to be funneling into this system in the coming years. And it seems clear that the system is not ready for it.
Well, it's certainly fascinating. Jake, would you mind sticking around after this break? I want to dig a little bit deeper into this great piece you've written for ProPublica.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
So Jake is the business reporter at ProPublica. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake_Bernstein. We're chatting about this kind of revolving door when it comes to treatment, where these recovery homes are telling people to go to specific treatment centers, and it just kind of keeps this loop going regardless of the quality. It's terrifying when you think about it. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. You can, of course, follow me and engage on this discussion on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. When we come back, we'll talk more with Jake Bernstein from ProPublica. Stick around.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Jake Bernstein from ProPublica about his great piece, Inside a New York Drug Clinic, Allegations of Kickbacks and Shoddy Care. Jake, thanks for sticking around. So I know that some complaints have been filed with the Attorney General in New York. He's fairly aggressive when it comes to Wall Street. Is he showing any signs of being aggressive when it comes to these, revolving doors at these treatment places?
Well, we'll have to see. There hasn't been any sign of it yet. Some of these, generally what happens is the complaints get sent to another agency, either the Office of Medicaid Inspector General or the agency that licenses, the state agency that licenses drug treatments. And then if they feel that it rises to the level of potential fraud or criminal activity, they'll forward it on to the Attorney General's office. We know that the Attorney General's office is, or at least it appears that they have had some of these complaints for years and haven't done anything with them.
What's a few years when you're just talking about the lives of people? So in your reporting, you write, state regulations require comprehensive evaluations of new patients entering outpatient treatment. The evaluation includes personal histories that cover medical issues, family life, and education. Those kinds of details are present in Imbert's evaluation. They just don't always correspond to her life history. Tell us about that.
Well, in the clinic's defense, they don't do background checks themselves, right? So they're somewhat dependent on what the patient tells them. But in this particular case, it appears that they're so harried, they have to do so many of these, and the quality level is so low that instead of actually listening to what the patient says and writing it down accurately and really talking to them, they just cut and paste details from former patient files and put them into the new patient files. And one of the reasons why this is such a problem is based on these evaluations is this is what the counselor is going to look at when they do the counseling session. So they're going to look at these evaluations and then try to use these evaluations to have real counseling sessions with these indigent alcoholics and addicts. And the counseling is the key. I mean, that's what they really need in order to maintain their sobriety. So it really sort of shortchanges that whole process. But, I mean, just to show how sloppy it could be, I mean, in one case, both Imbert's parents are dead, and that's accurately noted at the top of her evaluation. But then further down, it says the question is, what do you do when you're feeling low or whatever? And the answer is, I pick up the phone and talk to my mother. So, I mean, it's
sad.
clear that they're just throwing things in there and not paying attention. I mean, another example is Imbert had a fairly, she was fairly well off as a child, and she went to a boarding school and graduated from that boarding school. But the evaluation says that she got her GED after being in Job Corps, and it doesn't correspond at all to what she actually told them. It was just taken from some other patient's file, it appears.
And, this is not to detract. There are lots of good treatment facilities for people out there, but we're talking about people who have no means. And they're, not only are they trying to recover from something that's very difficult to recover from, but they're also in a position in life where they don't have an opportunity to seek out the best care available. And that would lead me to say that the government has a responsibility to make sure that what is being offered and required in a lot of cases is the best it can be. What about these homes? What does it say that these folks who are, staying in these treatment homes, these sober homes, on such a paltry amount of money, given what the market is in New York, that the money being given hasn't been, increased in 25 years. How much interest does it look like the government has in making these people better, or is it just window dressing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It seems clear, from my interviews and from the way that state and local authorities have behaved, is that no one wants to take ownership of this problem. No one wants to put the money in and to regulate in a way that would actually take care of it. Instead, I think the attitude is, we can stick them somewhere, and that's better than nothing. I mean, that's just a guess, but it's certainly what their behavior seems to indicate. They've known that there's a problem with these sober homes for years. I'm not the first person to write about them. There's certainly been problems with outpatient treatment facilities. I mean, the Medicaid Inspector General did an investigation of New York Service Network in 2010 and forced them to give back half of what they billed over a 4-year period. And then there was no follow-up. And it appears that New York Service Network just went back to business as usual in a lot of respects. So it's just it seems clear that the regulators have kind of punted and are not really doing what they should be doing.
Well, and does New York Service Network talk to the press about this? What do they say?
Well, I had a long interview with the owner, and he insists that any complaints are the function of disgruntled employees that he's fired, that they're doing the best that they can, that he would never tolerate any kind of fraud, that he absolutely denies that there are any kickbacks. Basically, all the things that my extensive reporting seems to indicate is going on, he says is not going on.
Well, it's certainly sick and sad. How does he explain away the big, basically fine that they had to pay?
Well, he didn't really go into detail about that. He fought it. he got some lawyers, and they went to a judge, the administrative law judge, and he tried to fight the fine and ended up losing. So he's still paying it back. The way that this works is they actually take a certain percentage of your billing to pay the fine. So it can take years and years and years to pay these things back. It was
so the government has no incentive to shut down these shoddy operations. They just have an incentive to fine them to get the money back, because if they get shut down, there's no hope they'll ever get the money back.
That is something that has occurred to more than just you. I mean, as of August, NYSN, New York Service Network, still owes New York's Medicaid program $1.1 million. So, yes, if they shut down the clinic, conceivably, the state could be out that money.
It's absolutely fascinating. And you're not the only one that's taken notice of these issues. You've got CNN reporting on it and others as well. So this is obviously an issue that's happening all over the country, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We found there have been cases. Massachusetts has been very good about going after fraud involving drug treatment clinics and these sober homes. They've made a number of different cases in recent years. In Florida, there was a task force in South Florida that found some cases of this kind of stuff. And as you said, CNN and the Center for Investigative Reporting did tremendous work in California and found a number of different clinics where bad treatment and fraud appeared to be going on.
It's absolutely sick. Jake Bernstein, the business reporter from ProPublica, thanks for joining me.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You can follow him on Twitter at Jake_Bernstein. You can also check out his work on ProPublica. This is a fascinating story. You'll want to read the whole thing. When we come back after this break, we're going to get caught up on the Virginia governor's race, one of the big races happening this November. We'll be talking to Anna Shaw, the executive director of Progress Virginia, about crazy, just absolutely right-wing, far right-wing Ken Cuccinelli, the Republican nominee. You will not want to miss it. Thankfully, Terry McAuliffe is ahead in the polls. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we will be back after this.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders and best in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
Welcome back to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. All afternoon, more about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter at Karl Frisch. You can find me on any social networking program. Speaking of social media, one of my favorite things to look for on Twitter and Facebook is anything having to do with Ken Cuccinelli. He is the absolutely bonkers Republican nominee for governor in the great state of Virginia. And that race is heating up. Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, is thankfully ahead in the polls, but who knows what will happen in November. Joining me now to talk about the race and everything else that's happening in Virginia is Anna Scholl. She's the Executive Director of Progress Virginia. Anna, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, catch us up to speed. Ken Cuccinelli, who would like to basically bring us back to like 1830 in terms of our legal framework, is the Republican nominee for governor, and he's running against Terry McAuliffe, who we all know.
Absolutely. Ken Cuccinelli is the current Attorney General and before that served in the Virginia State Senate. And he has really built a career out of Tea Party conservatism. He has a long history of crusades to limit women's access to health care.
Which is a really nice way of putting it, by the way. And I think the Tea Party would take umbrage at him being likened to being the Tea Party, since he's probably more extreme than the Tea Party.
That's potentially an accurate statement. He, was the first Attorney General to sue the federal government over Obamacare, and actually decided to go it alone and refused to join the suit that made it all the way to the Supreme Court. So his suit was thrown out. He crusaded against Michael Mann, who was a climate scientist at the University of Virginia.
And that's a particularly interesting case there. Tell us about that in a little bit more detail. I mean, this is a scientist at a university in Virginia, a public university in Virginia, and Cuccinelli's office decided we're going to go after this guy.
So Cuccinelli is as I mentioned, a very conservative Republican and a climate denier. He does not believe in the science of climate change. And Michael Mann is and was at the time a climate scientist employed by the University of Virginia. And his research was part of the basis for that infamous hockey stick graph of warming temperatures around the planet. And Cuccinelli really launched this anti-science crusade against him Tim really bought into this conservative, radical idea that the research was fake, and used his powers as Attorney General to sue Michael Mann and the University of Virginia to get him to turn over his research, subpoenaed him, cost the university hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees in what was really widely seen as an assault on academic freedom that had very little basis in science or fact, but was really seen as widely motivated by animus towards the research he was putting out there.
Well, and one of my favorite things is this, Cuccinelli really shies away from talking about these issues now. I mean, just to bring people into the conversation a little bit, he's also proposed legislation that would make divorce impossible for women who cannot prove that their husbands were cheating on them or that they were violent, etc. So you couldn't have, if you were just not in love with your spouse anymore, you couldn't get a divorce. And, not to mention all of the anti-choice legislation that he's offered. But when you ask him about these things, him being against teaching about birth control, every kind of right-wing thing that you can think of, when you ask him about these things, he says, this is not what this is about. This is about jobs and blah, 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 blah. He doesn't want to talk about it. But then there's this video that surfaced of him speaking before a very right-wing audience. And, I think it was right after he had been elected Attorney General, where he's bragging to the audience, right-wing Christian fundamentalists, that, the Washington Post thinks I tell them I just talk about the economy and traffic. But we all know that I'm really going to go after this abortion business. Do you think that video's had much of an impact on the race?
I don't know that particular video has, but I think it's emblematic of the problem that Ken Cuccinelli is facing in this race, which is that after having built a career on attacking women's access to health care, on trying to criminalize not only abortion, but birth control
and sex
women across the Commonwealth, he's finding out those positions aren't actually very popular.
He tried to outlaw sex between consenting adults.
Right. So it's, it runs the spectrum. So he has patroned personhood legislation that would outlaw not only abortion, but several popular kinds of birth control, as well as potentially forms of
in vitro fertilization.
Exactly. He also has been a staunch supporter of Virginia's anti-sodomy laws, which your listeners may remember were struck down by the Supreme
Well, and let's just be very clear that, when we talk about sodomy and what these laws mean, they just mean that you can only have sex in a marriage missionary style.
Exactly.
That's it. So if you are a straight couple, this impacts you as much as it does a gay couple.
Exactly. Cuccinelli has decried that those laws can no longer be enforced. He actually voted against an attempt several years ago after the Supreme Court decision to revise the statute so that it would only apply to situations that involved a minor. So that law has remained on the books in Virginia, and sort of inexplicably, some Commonwealth attorneys have continued to use it to prosecute individuals. And Cuccinelli now has a pending appeal to the Supreme Court to try to get them to revisit that Lawrence v. Texas decision and keep Virginia's sodomy statute on the books and enforceable.
Well, and the makeup of the Supreme Court hasn't changed much since then. He's for somebody who claims to be a conservative, he just doesn't seem to mind wasting money, for the people of Virginia. And polls are now showing that Terry McAuliffe is ahead by 5 to 7 points. Is that the feeling you're getting on the ground?
The feeling here definitely is that Ken Cuccinelli's history of extremism is starting to come through and people are paying attention. We always knew that this was going to be a very close race, and we think it's a close race still. Obviously the poll that matters is the one that's on Election Day. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times before. But the makeup of this electorate and who ultimately comes out to vote in November is going to be the final deciding factor. Historically, in Virginia, off-year elections, when we elect our state officials, tend to be a older, more conservative, and whiter electorate, which sometimes makes it difficult for more progressive candidates.
Well, and also, in Virginia, the governor's mansion is usually controlled by the party that's not in the presidency, at least for the last several terms, at least. It'd be a big deal if Ken Cuccinelli were to lose, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. It would be a big deal, I think, both for what it says about his brand of conservatism, the appeal of these right-wing extremists and the Tea Party in more purple electorates. But frankly, it also would be a big deal for the people of Virginia for the kinds of policies that we would see implemented over the next 4 years.
How big are the ethics problems of the governor playing into this election, not just for governor, but for the state legislative races as well?
I think they're a really big deal. In Virginia, we have very few rules when it comes to ethics. You can, for state races, there are no limits on campaign contributions, and there are no limits on who you can accept a contribution from. The only standard is disclosure, and that's the same for gifts in state government. You can take as many gifts as you want with no limits. You just have to disclose that you took them. And the fact that some of our elected officials could not even seem to meet that very basic standard of disclosure, I think is troubling to a lot of Virginians. That issue of transparency in government is so important for Virginians being able to independently evaluate whether our elected officials are being responsive to us or whether they're being responsive to somebody else who is attempting to curry favor. Bob McDonnell, until this gift scandal, was a very popular governor here. I think folks are taken aback to
He was going to be president someday.
Right. I think folks are very taken aback to see that someone they trusted and respected could have been this ethically compromised.
Well, and Ken Cuccinelli has ties to the same donor, as do previous Republican Attorney General and gubernatorial candidates. So it's not shocking to see it filtering all the way down.
Right. So Ken Cuccinelli took $18,000 in gifts from this same donor, Johnny Williams, who's the CEO of a company called Star Scientific. Just this past week, actually, he donated the value of those gifts after refusing to do so for, I think, 42 days. But it's not actually his only ethical problem. He's also taken $100,000 from a coal company called Consul Energy that currently is locked in a legal battle with Southwest Virginia landowners who are claiming that a Consul subsidiary removed natural gas from their property without properly compensating the landowner.
A Republican involved with an energy company? Oh, that's just shocking. Anna Scholl, I really want to thank you for giving us this update on the Virginia governor's race. Everybody should check out their website. It's Progress Virginia. That's progressva.org. Anna, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
In the next hour of the show, we've got some great stories we want to talk to you about. Houston Police Department negligence and Elizabeth Warren at the AFL-CIO. Stick around, and we'll be back after this Take Action News.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Why would former Attorney General Ramsey Clark care whether the Army major found guilty of mass murder at Fort Hood is forced to shave his beard?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Major Nadal Malik Hassan, who represented himself but offered no defense in his military trial, was found guilty of murdering 13 soldiers at Fort Hood in November 2009 and sentenced to death. He now sits on the Army's death row in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, pending the result of his automatic appeal. Army officials there are insisting that Hassan, who has grown a beard as required by his belief in Islam, must comply with the Army's grooming rule that prohibits soldiers from having a beard or a goatee. And if Hassan won't shave off his beard by himself, the prison will use force to shave it off for him. Hassan might try to stop this by enforcing his rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, but no military lawyer is authorized to file that lawsuit for him. So, human rights attorney Ramsey Clark, who has expressed concern over the beard issue and other aspects of Hassan's case, is going to visit him in Fort Leavenworth. We expect Mr. Clark to take the position that in America, religious freedom is a fundamental right for everyone, both the revered and the despised, including a convicted mass murderer on death row in Fort Leavenworth.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
With your Working Virginia update, I'm Doug Cunningham.
We are not fighting just for our members. We are fighting for all working people. We stand up for the working people. Whether you carry a union card or not, we're going to be there for you so that if you're injured on the job, you'll be taken care of. So that if you get sick, you'll be taken care of. So that you can earn a wage so that you can take care of yourself and your family.
Dan Duncan, president of the AFL-CIO's Northern Virginia Central Labor Council. Duncan says the economy is still issue number one for Virginians, and there's been little or no economic stimulus effort from Virginia's government.
The economy is still the most important thing to all of us. We want to make sure that all working people have a job that pays well and takes care of their needs.
Working Virginia update produced by Workers Independent News. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live United.
So give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell. Organized labor received some good news in the midst of its 2013 Constitutional Convention in Los Angeles this week. On Monday, an Indiana judge ruled that the state's right-to-work law was unconstitutional. Judge John Sadia ruled the law unconstitutional because it required unions to provide benefits to non-members without just compensation. The law was challenged by Operating Engineers Local 150, and the union's general president, James Callahan, announced the ruling on the convention floor.
Local 150 argued Indiana's right-to-work law is unconstitutional because it makes it illegal for unions to collect fees for services that are federally required to be provided. This is a victory for the middle class. These laws are nothing but thinly veiled tools to weaken unions, and this is a big win for workers who rely on unions to provide decent wages and benefits.
On Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller filed an appeal to the ruling, and it will be sent directly to the Indiana Supreme Court. That announcement came shortly before a resolution was introduced and passed, calling on the AFL-CIO to develop a Southern organizing strategy. The resolution was partially born out of the predominance of right-to-work laws that have been passed in Southern states over the last decade. AFSCME Florida Council 79 President Jeanette Wynn spoke on the floor to explain how right-to-work laws have been detrimental to working people all across the South.
Suppression of dues deduction, suppression of pension, and suppression of all those state benefits that state employees have earned throughout their career.
This week, the labor movement also became more inclusive by adopting a resolution supporting gender identity and expression. The resolution, which passed unanimously, means the AFL-CIO will officially recognize the rights of transgendered employees. International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers International President Ed Hill introduced the resolution.
This amendment makes an important statement about the Federation's support for transgender workers and the fact that they are welcome in our movement. It shows that we're a broad and inclusive movement that welcomes all workers.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can work with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
Oh, drat these computers.
Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internet.
I've used on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes.
They're so naughty and so complex.
Computers are my forte.
To the final hour of Take Action News. I'm your host, Karl Frisch. All afternoon, as we do every week at this time, it is time for Dr. Digipol, Alan Rosenblatt. Alan, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Carl.
So, you've seen a lot of political types, reporters and elected officials, kind of engaging on social media, but with like a hint of pop culture to it. Tell us about it.
Well, this really struck me when I was watching the Colbert Report the other night, and Representative Jim McDermott from Washington State was on there, and he seemed to just simply not get any of Colbert's references. Nothing. Completely over his head on everything. And I realized, well, he's 76 years old.
Right.
And there's a whole culture that has emerged of references, cultural references that have emerged since he's been paying attention to them. And, it's not really fair to expect that of him. Then I realized that, the average age of the House is 57 years old, up from 53 back at the end of World War II. And the average age of senators is 63, which is also up since 1945. And they're all climbing. They're getting older and older. And every time I listen to them talk, I realize these people are, by and large, completely out of touch with pop culture. So when I start seeing them talk on Twitter, tapping into pop culture, I have to ask myself, are they being real or are they being contrived? Is it really them connecting in a real way with the pop culture of the world, of the country, or are they using this simply for political expediency in the process? So we've seen some examples. Darrell Issa, representative from California, who I often refer to as the witch hunter in chief of the United States Congress, took a selfie of himself and posted it to Instagram and thereby to Twitter as he arrived in California. Earlier, we saw Hillary Clinton taking selfies of herself with Chelsea. Jeb Bush is now soliciting and giving fantasy football advice on Twitter. Does he really play fantasy football, or is he just doing this in order because he knows it's something that should be done, or is there a staff assistant who plays fantasy football?
Is this the equivalent of, when you look at the celebrity tabloids, stars just like us, they eat food?
Yeah, except that many of these cases, I really do think Issa tweets for himself. I really do think Jeb Bush is tweeting for himself. And when Justin Amash tweeted that somebody should make a Twitter meme of Gandalf saying "You shall not pass," he really was doing that himself. So there are definitely some of them out there that are using Twitter to reveal a human side of them.
Alan, I'm going to blow your mind. Here's what I think should happen. And Twitter, you should listen to this. I know that you're doing an initial public offering, but take heed. I think that the new iPhone that has the fingerprint identification to unlock a phone, I think that in order to tweet on an account, you should have to use your fingerprint. And then that way we'd know whether this stuff was just some guys to pull one over on people, or if they were actually tweeting for themselves. What do you think?
Well, idea. There certainly are legitimate Twitter channels that are run by the staff of members of Congress.
Sure.
They don't hide the fact, and I'm all for that. I do have a hard time with members of Congress who pretend that it's them when it's really a staff person. I find that to be both disingenuous and dangerous for them.
Well, it's when you mention the pop culture thing, it's very dangerous if it's not executed well. It reminds me, I believe it was the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee that put up a website called Game of Dems. And the map they used for this website was a map from Lord of the Rings. Now, if you're going to tangle with a bunch of nerds, you better have your science fiction and fantasy stuff, right as rain. It better be correct 100%. So immediately after this Game of Dems website went up, which was, a play on Game of Thrones, the nerds across and I count myself among them, nerds across the Twitter sphere and the blogosphere lambasted the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee for using a map from Lord of the Rings. In essence, what it said was, once again, Republicans are not hip, they're not cool, they don't know the difference between Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings.
Right. There is time, there is a level of an advisor saying, hey, you should tweet about Game of Thrones, here's a nice little twist to it, and then they leave it in the hands of the member to do the tweeting, and they just butcher it.
Well, and doesn't it have to fit, doesn't it have to fit the personality of the person doing the tweeting? I mean, even if you're tweeting for your boss, if you work for a 90-year-old member of Congress, you're not going to be as believable when you talk about Nene Leakes and how great she looked on last night's episode of Real Housewives from Atlanta. People just aren't going to believe it. But if over time you kind of dribble out personal details and get people to a point where they would believe that this kind of stuff could be done by this person, you're much more likely to be believable and therefore not ridiculed.
I agree. I think, for example, if you're a congressman or a senator from Wyoming, for example, over time you could tweet occasionally about Longmire, the sheriff in a small Wyoming county, and it becomes more and more believable because there's a reason why you should, and because it shows that you're actually watching the show, or at least joking about the show. I like to tweet, this week on Longmire, something very slow will happen.
Right.
Monday night. For me, the idea of being able to reveal that side of you is to remind the people who follow you that you're human. And so I think it's really important that they do this, but you're right, they've got to do it well, they've got to do it in a way that doesn't expose them for being fraud.
Well, the other thing is, if you can do it effectively, you're more likely to grow your following. It's far more interesting to follow people and learn information about them than it is to get press releases and 140-character statements about news of the day.
Absolutely. And I also think that, we all know that trust in government is a really big issue. Political efficacy, political scientists call it. Trust in government's really low. Approval of Congress is at an all-time low. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that government seems so removed from the people. And anything that government officials can do to bring themselves closer to the people is good for their for trust ratings, it's good for their approval ratings, and it's good for the health of our democracy. And I see Twitter and Facebook and the opportunity for them to really be involved in conversations with the American people, not just their constituents, but with the American people about things that the American people do in addition to the seriousness of policy work.
Of course,
for America.
That being said, you can go too far. And, of course, I'm referencing Anthony Weiner. So don't get that personal with me. I don't need to be that fully engaged in the personal details of my representatives in Washington or elsewhere. Dr. Digipol, Alan Rosenblatt, thanks for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
All righty. Take Action News continues. And in the next break, in the next segment, we're going to be talking to Emily Prang from the Texas Observer about a fascinating story concerning the Houston Police Department negligence. So you'll want to stick around. We'll be right back.
Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, And even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Welcome back to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. Accusations against Houston police officers, including racial profiling, excessive force, and negligence, are rarely punished. This according to a report in the Texas Observer, and it's just absolutely frightening, this story. You can go check it out at texasobserver.org. The headline, "The Horror Every Day, Police Brutality in Houston Goes Unpunished." Joining me to talk about her story is Emily DePrang, a fascinating piece of journalism. Emily, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if there's one thing that, if you talk to a Texan, they're very proud of being from Texas. If you talk to a Houstonian, they're even more proud of being from Houston. This would be a notch in the other direction, something not to be proud of. Tell us about it.
It is. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine from LA, and he was saying, wow, you guys are more cosmopolitan, more like LA every day in some ways. Houston has a racial profiling and especially a police brutality problem. But the thing that lets there be a problem is that there's also no accountability. The system is set up, it's just really tight. So it's very, very difficult to discipline a police officer. It's very difficult to prove that allegations happened, because the burden of proof is really it's really higher than a citizen can reach. Than when a cop's word is against the citizens, the cop always wins.
So walk us through some of these examples. Particularly, you start off with Sebastian Prevost. Tell us about that.
Oh, Sebastian Prevost is a guy he's married, he has 3 little boys, and he was driving home late with a friend of his in January 2012. And he was about a mile and a half from his house, and he came to a stop sign, and he saw that there was a cop there at the 4-way stop, and he says that he saw that there were 2 white cops in the car, and he thought, I hope I don't get any trouble. He's a black man, and it was late. So he comes to a stop at the stop sign, and he continues. The report is that he stopped past the white line at the stop sign, which I don't even know if I've ever done that. Probably so. I'm not aware of that as being an enforceable offense. But anyway, the officers pull up behind and they put the foot on their lights. Now he's a mile and a half from his house, and in Houston, even though white motorists more often have contraband on their search, black motorists are much more often arrested. In fact, there's about the same number of white and black citizens in Houston, and black motorists are searched without probable cause more than 4 times as often as white motorists. And that's information that I got from an annual profiling report that HPD keeps on itself. And this is a report that concluded, like, the evidence demonstrates that HPD does not engage in racial profiling. So it's hard to say that you can show any evidence that would make them acknowledge that this happened. But anyway, so Sebastian Prevost is driving, and then this cop lights up behind him, and he thinks, well, if they arrest me, then they're going to impound my car. And if they impound my car, he says, my wife had to go to work in the morning, my kids had to go to work had to go to school in the morning, and if they impound my car, I'm not going to have time to get out of jail and then pay to get it out so that everybody can have their day. So he's like, I'm going to keep driving until I'm in front of my house. And he also said that he was scared because he saw that it was 2 white cops. He's from Louisiana, where they also have some police brutality problems, and he was afraid of being beaten. So he pulls up in front of his house, and he drives the speed limit, stopping at every stop sign. And he gets in front of his house, and by that time, they've called for backup. And you gotta understand, these officers don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know if they're being led into an ambush. They don't know what kind of situation they're going to. So they call for backup. So you've got 10 cop cars around him in front of his house by the time he pulls up in front of it. And he gets out and he puts his hand up. But what happens next is that they beat him so severely that he had to be taken to the emergency room to have part of his ear reattached. This is somebody who had no weapons, had no contraband, somebody who, when he was finally, when they stopped beating him and arrested him, and after he got out of the hospital, they charged him and convicted him of evading arrest. There wasn't an offense other than the fact that he continued to his house whenever they tried to pull him over.
And what ended up happening as a result of this beating?
He was physical therapy. That's one of the results. And he filed a complaint because it wasn't just that they beat him; it was that they also his wife came out in the front yard. She's this tiny woman, 11. She comes out in the front yard and she sees that he's being beaten. She knows she can't do anything about it, but she gets out her cell phone and well, when they saw that, 3 cops came over and they punched her. They put her in the cop car. That part is undisputed. And she says they also confiscated the phone, took out the memory chip. So he was mostly upset that they were harsh with his wife, that they abused his wife. So he filed an open records. He filed an internal affairs complaint alleging excessive force. And that was investigated, and then the department decided no, that was an appropriate use of force. It was a violation, and absolutely nothing happened.
And what does he? Is he suing the department at this point?
No, he's not. And in fact, he has had trouble finding a lawyer who will help him try to seek justice, because it's just as the story demonstrates, the cards are stacked. His was actually one of the cases that the Justice Department decided to investigate when they announced that they're going to be.
What am I missing here? I mean, he's not suing the department because an attorney in the fourth largest city in the country won't take his case?
Yes, that's accurate. And let me give you.
Are there extenuating things out there that we're not hearing? Like, it just seems so odd. I mean, it seems like such a slam dunk of a case, regardless of what Internal Affairs does.
It does, and let me give you an example of why it's not a slam dunk. In 2011, a local news station aired footage of 12 Houston police officers hitting and kicking and beating an unarmed 15-year-old boy who was face down in the grass. Now, a security camera video happened to catch that, and that was aired publicly, and only 12 officers were disciplined, but only 7 of them were fired. 3 of them got their jobs back through arbitration. Only 4 of them were indicted for anything. They were indicted for misdemeanor official oppression, not for assault, not for anything like that. They were indicted for misdemeanor official oppression. 1 of them was found not guilty. 1 of them was found guilty and given probation, and 2 of them pled out got probation. We don't have it.
Right, but in a civil court, you can sue somebody for the damage they've caused to you. It wouldn't have anything to do with throwing people in jail, no. But it would be some kind of restitution for the damage caused. And you're saying that he's not been able to find an attorney to do that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that his word is against an officer. And let me give you some numbers that might help that as well. In between 2007 and 2000.
Are the officers saying that he struck them or anything like that?
No, they just say he fled.
Uh-huh. So his word against them is that they all agree that he fled, and then they beat the crap out of him.
That's absolutely true.
I just can't for the life of me figure out why a lawyer wouldn't be taking this case, if that's all true.
I wish it were exemplary, and I wish that I thought that he would have any success. I mean, in the period that I studied, 2007 through 2012, there were 706 complaints of excessive force against Houston police officers. It's important to remember that 118 of them were internal. 118 of those were other officers saying, you know what, I understand the job, I understand the culture, but even I think that was messed up, that was too far. And you can't anonymously complain about another officer. You can't file an anonymous complaint. So if you're essentially doing what would be considered ratting out another officer for mistreating a suspect, you know, you're really violating the sort of having that kind of silence kind of stuff, right? So that's a real risk that these 118 officers took when they reported other officers for excessive force.
Emily, are you? This is the second piece in a series. Are you working on a third piece?
No, the thing is this stuff, because the more I write about it, the more people write to me.
Are you still there? All right, we've been talking to Emily DePrang. You've really got to check out her work at the Texas Observer regarding the Houston Police Department. Absolutely compelling stuff, frightening, really. You know, and the idea that somebody wouldn't be able to seek justice for this type of behavior is just sad and sickening. And it's important that this type of stuff sees the light of day. So read those reports at the Texas Observer and get up to speed. It's very important. This is Take Action News. When we come back, we're going to talk about Elizabeth Warren's remarks at the AFL-CIO convention. Stick around. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to WIAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/canceranswerline.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, 34 after. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka denounced the United States Supreme Court last weekend as a right-wing panel that serves the interests of corporate America. On the opening day of the AFL-CIO's convention, Warren, the highest-profile national Democrat to address the gathering, warned attendees of a, quote, corporate capture of the federal courts. In a speech that voiced a range of widely held frustrations on the left, Warren assailed the court as an instrument of the wealthy that regularly sides with the U.S. Chamber of Congress. She cited an academic study that called the current Supreme Court, their 5 conservative-leaning justices, among the, quote, top 10 most pro-corporate justices in half a century. Joining me to talk about this, as well as some other angles to this story that haven't been discussed, is Tom Donnelly with the Constitutional Accountability Center. Tom, thanks for joining me. Tom, are you there?
I am.
So you saw the speech. What did you make of it?
I thought it was a pretty remarkable speech because Senator Warren really honed in on something that I think has escaped notice from a lot of progressives, and that is that the Roberts Court has been extremely pro-corporate, more pro-corporate than the previous courts, which were also quite conservative as well. And in both that speech and in other speeches, she's done a good job of not just highlighting the cases a lot of people know, like Citizens United, but also looking at some of the lower profile cases that term by term and case by case are really chipping away at a lot of the pocketbook protections that the American people really need.
And there's no debate over whether or not the Chamber of Commerce is doing better. Your organization put out a study at the end of the last Supreme Court term that showed that in, 13 out of 14 cases, something like that, the Supreme Court was victorious. And not only were they victorious in a larger percentage of cases, but they were also filing amicus briefs in an increasing number of cases, right?
Absolutely. So, last term, the Chamber filed amicus briefs in about a quarter of the cases before the court. To put that in sort of comparative perspective, looking at the Burger Court in the early 80s, the Chamber was only involved in about, around 4 or 5% of the cases. So they're very much sort of occupying the field when it comes to the Supreme Court's cases. And then last term, the Chamber in the cases they were in had a 14-3 record. Furthermore, every one of the cases that actually divided the justices ideologically, and each of those cases it was the 5 conservatives against the progressive wing. So it really they won each of the most controversial cases, and they could count on Chief Justice Roberts and the other conservatives to rule in their favor.
Well, and just to tease out Elizabeth Warren's theme here, so 30 years ago there were way more cases, and the Chamber of Commerce was involved in a far smaller percentage. Now there are fewer cases that the Supreme Court is considering, and the Chamber is involved in way more of them.
Absolutely. And, they really, they are a professional organization. They have great lawyers. They hire some of the best members of the Supreme Court bar to help them in drafting their briefs. And, they are certainly, among the court's conservatives at least, one of the voices that they are most likely to listen to, both because of the quality of the products they put out, but also because they're making arguments that the conservative wing tends to be receptive to.
Well, and here's what I fear. I fear when we talk about this kind of stuff that people listening at home end up hearing wah 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 wah, right? The parents and adults from the Peanuts. Absolutely. These cases actually have impact on real people, right? We all hear about the sexy cases like Prop 8 and DOMA and Citizens United and everything else. But these other cases that the Chamber is getting involved in, some of them, for example, are discrimination cases, right? Where somebody's been discriminated against based on their ethnicity, and the court is saying you don't have the right to bring this case to trial.
Absolutely. I could take sort of 3 very concrete examples. One is, in the area of workplace discrimination, there were 2 cases last term, Vance and Nassar, that both made it much more difficult for workers who complain of discrimination on the job to prevail in those cases. Another case pitted American Express versus a small Italian restaurant in California, and effectively, because of an arbitration agreement that pretty much everyone has to sign up for in order to get any product or service in the United States, because this small restaurant agreed to that, the court pretty much makes it impossible for small businesses like this small Italian restaurant to challenge American Express when they're jacking up prices and using allegedly monopolistic practices. And then a final example was a bunch of cable customers in the Philadelphia media market trying to come together to challenge Comcast for, again, they're saying their rates got jacked up, that Comcast was using its monopoly in the area to, take advantage of that, jack up their prices. They wanted to join together in a lawsuit, and the court said no, and really makes it much, much more difficult for individual small businesses, individual Americans to join together and try to hold corporations accountable for their misdeeds.
Well, and perhaps the most famous of these types of cases was the Lilly Ledbetter case from a couple terms ago, when the court basically said, yes, you may have proved that you were paid less than your counterparts doing the same work, but you didn't prove it quick enough.
Exactly. I mean, that is that's such a concrete example of how difficult the court. So the court takes a law passed by Congress, reads it in the most stingy manner possible, and then creates this situation where, Lilly Ledbetter worked in a Goodyear tire plant. She worked there for decades. She did a darn good job. She retired, and as she's retiring, she doesn't know how much her fellow employees make. But as she's retiring, someone anonymously tips her off that she was making a lot less than her male counterparts. And the court effectively said, no, you should have known this many years ago.
Because, Tom, as we all know, we all have these conversations with our colleagues because they're not uncomfortable in the slightest.
No, not at all. No, not at all. And I mean, again, going back to Lilly Ledbetter in particular, she was a pioneer at this plant as a female employee that worked her way up and did a terrific job. And in the end, the court was stingy, and it took Congress, took President Obama, then candidate Obama, and then Congress to come back, fix the statute, and pretty much tell the Roberts Court, no, you got this wrong.
But that was when Congress was controlled entirely by Democrats, and we had a Democratic president. And Congress really hasn't seen fit to do much of anything to fix the Supreme Court's mistakes of late. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned arbitration in I believe it was the Italian Colors case. There's also this interesting case concerning a woman in New York who was trying to, discharge her debt and get her debts in order, and paid a company $4,000, and they left her in deeper debt. And the courts basically said, her agreement had arbitration, but here's the kicker. You have to go arbitrate this case in Arizona. So she sued, saying that was unconscionable. And why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, sure. This is a case called Duran. It was up in the Northeast in the Second Circuit, and she pretty much there was a clause within the arbitration clause that said, if you sue us, pretty much you have to arbitrate in Arizona. Now, this is a near broke woman in New York trying to go after a sketchy credit repair company.
Well, why doesn't she just get on her plane? I mean, she has her own plane, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, pretty much what the court said was, look, we know so the court said, no, in order to challenge this clause of the arbitration agreement saying that it's unconscionable for you to have to travel to Arizona to arbitrate, you must actually arbitrate in Arizona to challenge this clause in front of the arbitrator. And the Second Circuit, the court said, look, we realize that this is illogical to a certain extent, but pretty much the Supreme Court has made us do it. This is the natural result of the court's arbitration cases. And so, it really, I think that's a case that really concretely shows in just all of these cases that no one is paying attention to in the lower courts, how ordinary Americans are just completely having a tough time with it.
Well, and they have a cumulative effect, really. I mean, you may not hear about them, but over time, these precedents get set that make it harder and harder for everyday Americans to have their day in court, right?
Absolutely. And that's a theme across from everything from, workplace discrimination laws, to, consumer protection laws, to antitrust laws, really across the board. And the net effect of especially the court's cases dealing with these arbitration clauses, that again, obviously we don't get to negotiate with Comcast over whether or not we have this arbitration clause in practice. But effectively what it does is allow these large companies to to pretty much contract around federal and state law protection. And in the end, it's cable customers, it's Ms. Duran in New York, it's small companies like Italian Colors Restaurant that find it very, very difficult for them to vindicate their federal rights in court.
And it's already difficult enough when you consider the types of legal hurdles that they're up against with, fancy, high-powered attorneys that corporations can afford. Tom, would you mind sticking around with us
happy
for this
to do it.
break? If you're just joining us, we're talking to Tom Donnelly from the Constitutional Accountability Center. Did you know that Tuesday is Constitution Day, when we celebrate the ratification of our Constitution and American citizenship in general? Stick around. We're going to talk to Tom Donnelly about this important day and why we the people means we the people and not we the corporations. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we will be right back after this break.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying your home. Free consultation. At 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. So this Tuesday is Constitution Day, and That is a day that we celebrate our Constitution and our U.S. citizens. And it's also a day when we should be standing up and saying, we the people. This is about we the people, not we the corporations. Joining us to talk about this and all things Constitution and Supreme Court is our good friend Tom Donnelly with the Constitutional Accountability Center. Tom, thanks for sticking around.
My pleasure.
So, Constitution Day is Tuesday. What are you going to do to celebrate?
Well, at a very practical level, I'm going to be giving a talk over Skype to a bunch of college students in Vermont, which I'm very excited about. Where I'll be talking about the EME Homer case, which is an important environmental case before the court this term. But more generally, just trying to make the argument that progressives should embrace the Constitution. For the last 30 years at least, the conservatives have really made the Constitution their own, but fundamentally, the Constitution is a progressive document. And so, not only on Constitution Day, but pretty much every day, that's
right.
That's the argument that I try to make to progressives.
Well, and in particular, it's that's why I think it's so gratifying to see people like Senator Warren from Massachusetts being so vocal about the concerns here when it comes to corporations having their way with the courts. As we look at the upcoming term, there's some other big cases that have a potential of putting the powerful, even more firmly entrenched in the driver's seat. McCutcheon comes to mind, which would play games with the limits that we have on donors. So, donors could basically put as much money into federal elections as they want. Tell us about that case and what you all are doing, in terms of your involvement there.
Absolutely. It's an extremely important case. And just to put it in a little historical context in the Roberts Court, so obviously a lot of people know Citizens United from a few years ago that pretty much allowed corporations to spend unlimited money during our campaigns. It got rid of corporate campaign spending bans, which was a huge deal. But apart from that case, the Roberts Court has chipped away bit by bit many different ways in which Congress and states can try to create clean election systems. Everything from making it harder to construct a public financing scheme in the states that actually allows more of an even playing field among candidates. And what's important about McCutcheon, apart from the actual provision it's dealing with, which is what's called aggregate campaign contribution limits, which is the sort of a ceiling on what any individual donor can give to candidates during a federal election cycle. The danger in it is it provides the court with an opportunity to begin to chip away at contribution limits themselves. So the one part of the law where Congress and states can still do quite a bit is limiting the amount that individual donors can give to a candidate. And this case runs the risk of beginning to chip away at state and federal power to even do that much.
And to that end, what is the constitutional argument here? Isn't Congress empowered to make the rules by which its very people are elected?
Well, I mean, apart from that, our brief in the case, Constitutional Accountability Center, the organization I work for, filed a brief in this case on behalf of Professor Larry Lessig, who is a professor at Harvard and one of the absolute experts in the country on campaign finance and constitutional history. And Professor Lessig's research is cutting edge, and our brief is the first time he'll be presenting it to the Supreme Court. And what he did was he looked at the debates at the founding when we were deciding when we were debating the Constitution and said, so what did the founders think about corruption? What did they think about the federal government's power over corruption? And pretty much what we find is that the founders cared quite a bit about corruption in the government and gave the federal government a great deal of power to limit corruption, and that this was actually one of the animating concerns at the founding, and that the founders' concerns are actually quite out of step with the very limited concept of corruption that the Roberts Court has. And so what that pretty much does is that if you actually take the founders' views, it would give Congress considerably more power to legislate in the area of campaign contributions, et cetera, et cetera.
So what you're saying is that if we look at the Constitution and its history, the text and the history of the Constitution, that Congress has the power to set these types of conditions.
it's a classic example of really the founders versus the Roberts Court, and an example of where actually embracing the text and history of the Constitution result in possibly progressive outcomes.
Well, like it did with the Affordable Care Act, for example. The progressive viewpoint being pushed with the text and history ultimately ended up perhaps saving the day when it comes to Obamacare. What other cases are you all watching in this coming term as potentially blockbuster? I know that we get caught up in what are considered necessarily big cases, but I'd love to know what you guys are looking at.
Sure. I had mentioned a case called EME Homer
right.
At the beginning of this segment, and that's a really important one where the conservative D.C. Circuit, which is an appeals court and really the second most important court in
right.
the country, issued a really, really aggressive opinion, conservative opinion, that struck down an important regulation of interstate air pollution. And this is a problem that has vexed Congress since the 1970s. And this is a regulation that was over a decade in the making. And it's really a sensible, well-constructed regulation that that pretty much ensures that if an upwind state is pushing pollution into a downwind state, that the upwind state will actually be held accountable for that, which has not been the case for decades. So anyway, that's
wait. Are you saying that pollution can actually cross a border?
Yeah, exactly. And so it is an amazing. So having read a lot of the administrative proceedings in this case, it's an amazingly difficult, complicated, technical problem. And here you have a judge, a very conservative judge on the D.C. Circuit, pretty much micromanaging what the Environmental Protection Agency can do here and saying, no, go back to the drawing board and, do this analysis instead. This analysis that is way too simplistic for how complicated the problem is. And so this is the classic example of a conservative court making it very, very difficult for a government agency to do its job and do what Congress told them to do through the Clean Air Act.
You might even say they're being activists.
One could say that.
Well, and that's the frightening thing here. I mean, so much of this is activism, and it's incremental erosion of the progress we've seen, whether it's in the civil rights arena with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act and stripping down of affirmative action policies, whether it's these cases that are taking power from the people and giving it back to the corporations. It's good to have people like you, Tom, and the Constitutional Accountability Center fighting to keep that from happening, or at least slow its pace. Where can people find the Constitutional Accountability Center online to help out?
Sure. Our website is www.theusconstitution.org.
That's pretty simple.
Exactly.
You can also follow the Constitutional Accountability Center on Twitter at MyConstitution. Tom Donnelly, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Carl.
All righty. This has been another great show. I want to thank everybody for being on today, particularly Peter and Rachel in the control room, and also all the fantastic guests that we've had. You should be sure to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. Follow us on Twitter to take part in the conversations during any show. Connect with us and like us on Facebook. You can also sign up for my email list at karlfrisch.com. That's KarlFrisch.com, and follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all the other social media applications out there, Vine, Instagram, whatever. We will be back next week. Again, this is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll see you around.
The former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
I'm Joshua Holland, and I host the Alternate Radio Hour, a weekly look at our screwy political scene. You know, some say you either have to laugh or cry at America's politics, but we think that's a false choice. Haven't you ever seen a baby wailing away, and then like a rubber squeaky toy comes along, and he's suddenly laughing and crying at the same time, and then snot comes out of the baby's nose? It's kind of like that. So grab a hanky and tune into the Alternate Radio Hour every Saturday at 4 p.m. on We Act Radio.
Toilet Plus always makes me think of the TPP.
The TPP? What's that, Toilet Paper Plus?
No, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
What the heck is that?
It's the biggest trade deal in history, and it's being negotiated in secret right now.
So?
So, if it passes Congress, it's going to affect everything we care about.
How can that be? I'm not making any deals with foreign countries.
The TPP is a backroom deal for multinational corporations that will give them control over our laws even at the local level. It will make food less safe, allow corporations to pollute more, raise the cost of medications, take away our internet freedom, ship more jobs overseas, and more.
Wow, I want to know more about that. What can we do about it?
Go to flushthetpp.org and take the pledge.
Then what?
Then you can join the actions in D.C. starting on September 21st to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
What do I have to do?
There's something for everyone to do. Talk to your neighbors about it, march and rally, hand out information, be part of the Fair Trade Brigade in Congress, and more.
That sounds like fun.
It is fun, but this is serious work. The TPP will give greater power to big corporations to profit with impunity, but we can stop them.
Okay, I can do that. I'm going to go to flushthetpp.org right now.
With your Working Virginia update, I'm Doug Cunningham.
We are not fighting just for our members. We are fighting for all working people. We stand up for the working people. Whether you carry a union card or not, we're going to be there for you so that if you're injured on the job, you'll be taken care of. So that if you get sick, you'll be taken care of. So that you can earn a wage so that you can take care of yourself and your family.
Dan Duncan, president of the AFL-CIO's Northern Virginia Central Labor Council. Duncan says the economy is still issue number one for Virginians, and there's been little or no economic stimulus effort from Virginia's government.
The economy is still the most important thing to all of us. We want to make sure that all working people have a job that pays well and takes care of their needs.
Working Virginia update produced by Workers Independent News. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
What do Noam Chomsky, Naomi Klein, Paul Krugman, and Glenn Greenwald have in common? I'm Joshua Holland, host of the Alternate Radio Hour, and they're just a few of the great guests we've had on the show in the last year. Does that mean it's a boring talking heads show? Oh no, I wouldn't do that to you. We laugh, we cry, sometimes we sing cheesy old songs from the 1980s. You know, you haven't really lived until you've heard Chomsky doing Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Tune in every Saturday at 4 p.m. on WPWC We Act Radio.
We Act Radio, powered by Ethical Electric. Do something.
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Shuster here on Take Action News. Also, of course, joined by our executive producer, Daniel Marins, and our board operator, Pete Callahan. So great to have you on this weekend edition, May 11th edition of our show. hats off to the Rock Newman Show for another amazing couple of hours. That guy gets the terrific interviews, and be sure, of course, to catch, if you missed any of it, and he had another great show today, you can always catch him on weactradio.com to see some of the videos. Daniel Marins, I was so intrigued this week by Meghan McCain's reaction to Mark Sanford, who won that special election for Congress in South Carolina. Mark Sanford, of course, the disgraced former governor.
Welcome to Breaking Through with me,